Welcome to Translation Theory, everyone. I'm Lunar Archivist, and today, in what I hope will end up being the inaugural episode of an ongoing series rather than a standalone video, I'll be reviewing some of the translation choices in WB Games Montreal's recent offering Gotham Knights, ones that were made during the course of the game's development, as well as localization decisions dating back years or even decades prior to its release, and discussing how both of them work together to help shape the final product. Initially, we'll be going over a couple of examples spanning multiple languages and various Batman-centric media properties before focusing in on my field of expertise, which happens to be German. Just to clarify two things before we get started. First, when it comes to entertainment media, especially anime, manga, and Japanese video games, there's been a recent tendency for fans dissatisfied with questionable translation decisions to begin differentiating between translation and localization. Broadly speaking, they consider translation to be the direct conversion of media content from one language to another, and localization, the adaptation of media content from one culture to fit the social norms, standards, and conventions of another culture. While making this distinction may be valid in other fields of entertainment or even in academic settings, when it comes to the video game industry, the two terms are, for all intents and purposes, used interchangeably, and no such formal separation exists between them. The language used in this video will reflect this reality. This brings us to our second point, which is an extension of the previous one. Let's be clear on what the purpose of this video isn't. If you came here to watch me do something along the lines of savagely dunking on some activist translators for ruining the latest entry in the Fire Emblem series, I regret to inform you that you're going to be disappointed. This is a be the change you wish to see in the world type of video, where I'll be using my 16 years of experience in video game localization testing to promote what I consider to be good practices and standards when it comes to translation, while simultaneously going over some of the unexpected pitfalls and problems that you might encounter along the way. And in the spirit of trying to make the world a better place, I'd like to make a brief segue to encourage viewers of this video to participate in the Amano Pikami Graduation Month celebration. For those who are out of the loop, Amano Pikami is a beloved VTuber who recently became the target of intense harassment and bullying just for considering the possibility of streaming another WB Games title, Hogwarts Legacy. An incident that, depending on which source you choose to believe, either prompted or accelerated her decision to retire, despite her obvious love for her job. I think it would be awesome if as many people as possible went out to show their support for her and made March 2023 her best and happiest month ever as a VTuber. Give her the wonderful send-off she deserves for bringing joy and laughter to so many people over the years. Case in point.
Let's kill the hole!
Hole?
Hole!
How?
Let's kill the hole!
Let's kill the hole!
Yeah!
あのやりまんぶっ殺そうぜみたいな。
Oh, and on the off chance that Pikami is listening to this, I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors and hope this video will encourage you to eventually study German like you always wanted to. And if you happen to be looking for someone to practice English or German with, you know where to find me. But now back to business. Since most people have a good working idea of what constitutes a quality translation, something that is accurate and faithful to the source material, I figured it would be more constructive and educational to shine a light on things that can potentially throw a monkey wrench into people's efforts to create one. To this end, I'll be covering a variety of topics related to this using examples from Gotham Knights. Among them the following: Precedent, Untranslatables, Puns, Wordplay and Idioms, Poems, and Acronyms. Plus, just to inject a little controversy into the mix, I'm going to throw in a couple of examples where I think that the translators actually managed to surpass the original in some way. Since I am a firm believer of getting the bitter, hard-to-swallow pills out of the way before addressing the more positive and fun stuff, we'll begin this presentation by discussing precedents and untranslatable, two situations where your autonomy and free will as a translator are severely compromised, if not outright undermined, by factors beyond your control. And speaking of beyond, if you look at the English promotional material for the deluxe edition of Gotham Knights, you'll notice a special type of character skin known as a suit style being prominently advertised. Based on the overall designs, especially those of Batgirl and Red Hood, DC fans will immediately recognize the Beyond suit styles as homages to the futuristic Batsuit from the classic 1999 DC Animated Universe cartoon series Batman Beyond. But if you happen to catch a glimpse of the German version of this promo, you may have noticed that, while the word for suit style has been translated, the name for it has not. It's still in English, but instead of Beyond, it reads of the future. And this same trend is observed in the Italian version of this advertisement. Why is that? Well, one look at the intro sequence from the international version of the cartoon will quickly make this clear. Batman Beyond was initially released in countries outside of North America in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Even in English-speaking ones such as Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, it was marketed as Batman of the Future, with almost all major foreign language versions either using this alternate English title or a reasonably approximate translation thereof, such as Batman in the Future, Batman the Future, and so on and so forth. One notable exception to this is the name of the French version, Batman la Relève, which means Batman the Relief or Batman the Replacement. While there are a few anomalies of note even in languages which otherwise adhere to this naming convention, such as the series being referred to as Batman Nowy Bohater or Batman New Hero in Polish physical media releases, despite its official title being Batman Przyszłości, and the version that aired on the Russian television channel CTC being called Nowy Batman or New Batman rather than Batman Budushiva. The bottom line is that Batman of the Future is the name by which the cartoon entered and became ingrained in the pop culture of various foreign countries, and has 24 years of branding, marketing, copyright, and trademark inertia behind it. Even if you hate the translation with a burning passion, there's not much you can really do about it now. As a translator, you just have to roll with it. And these are far from isolated incidents. A similar phenomenon can be observed in German with the various Year One DC comic book series, where the phrase is conventionally localized as the English equivalent of the first year instead. Now, as annoying as it is to be bound by precedent and having a decision on how something is to be localized imposed upon you, what's infinitely worse is when you stumble upon an untranslatable, something which can't be fully or accurately conveyed in your target language because fate has conspired to use centuries of linguistic evolution to bite you squarely in the ass. There's one good example of this in Gotham Knights, but in order to fully convey the magnitude of the problem, a quick history lesson on one of Batman's most prominent nicknames is in order. As far as Batman's nicknames go, the Dark Knight is an extremely old one that dates back almost as far as the character itself. It first appeared in print over 80 years ago, in the first issue of the Batman comic book from March 1940, specifically in the story that the Joker also premiered in, and gained a significant boost in visibility thanks to Frank Miller's 1986 miniseries The Dark Knight Returns. Due to Batman's status as an Avenger of the Night, written with an N, and his having a nickname containing Knight, written with a K, these homonyms have provided easy fodder for all kinds of puns and wordplay over the years. And Gotham Knights is no exception, as one of the game's taglines encouraged players to fill Batman's shoes by stepping into the night. Now, DC has gone through a variety of publishers while trying to enter foreign markets, having burned through at least 6 different ones in Germany alone, since its initial attempt in 1954. Considering that each of these publishers had their own translation styles, conventions, and glossaries, consistency between intercompany releases across various media was virtually non-existent for decades. It's only been in the last 10 to 15 years or so, most likely prompted by the success of the cross-media marketing juggernaut that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that DC slowly started streamlining the localization of its intellectual properties to strengthen brand recognition in various countries throughout the world. In the case of Batman's moniker The Dark Knight, a single official translation for the nickname across multiple languages more or less solidified around the time of the release of the 2008 movie of the same name. Among other things, this branding consolidation saw the reduction of at least 3 different translations of the nickname across 2 versions of the Spanish language to one for each: El Caballero Oscuro, the Dark Knight in Spain, and El Caballero de la Noche, the Knight of the Night, in Latin America. This development wasn't without a few hiccups, however. Though Simplified Chinese has since adapted the same translation for Dark Knight as traditional Chinese, it didn't receive an official one at the time, since the film wasn't released in mainland China. Hong Kong releasing the movie under the Cantonese title Batman Dark God probably didn't help. And then we have Germany, which has a perfectly good translation for the Dark Knight, Der Dunkle Ritter, that has not only been incorporated into the German names of Batman books and graphic novels that didn't originally contain it, but also made an appearance in the 2008 film's closing line of dialogue.
Ist ein stiller Wächter, ein wachsamer Beschützer, ein dunkler Ritter.
Yet in spite of that last one, they still decided to market that movie under its original English title anyway. Go figure. But I digress. And this, finally, brings us back full circle to the translation problem in Gotham Knights. In the game, Tim Drake's knighthood story arc is heavily centered around chess, specifically a chess set that Alfred Pennyworth hand-carved and gifted to Bruce Wayne at some point in the past, and one which, in perfect keeping with traditional dry British wit, had knights which sported a very unique feature.
I carved these pieces myself. I even gave the knights bat ears.
I noticed.
As we later find out, Bruce decided to embrace the joke by incorporating it into his chess-playing strategy when promoting pawns.
I suppose you choose a knight then. That was always Bruce's move. A little obvious, even for him.
At first glance, this seemingly innocuous bit of wordplay might not seem to be that big of a deal when it comes to translation. That is, until you realize that the joke fully working is contingent on the overlap of the word knight when it comes to the designations for the armored warrior, the chess piece, and Batman himself. And that, at a bare minimum, the latter 2 terms need to coincide for it to even partially work. Unfortunately, one look at the primary translations for those terms in the 13 languages into which Gotham Knights was localized, or supposed to have been localized in the case of Russian, indicates that this is almost never the case. A perfect 3-way overlap is only observed with simplified and traditional Chinese, presumably due to the terms having been directly lifted from English, and the intersection between the term for the chess piece and Batman's nickname in Korean and Japanese only happens because the word knight in those languages was phonetically adapted from English. In many others, such as French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, the overlap is between the word for the armored warrior and Batman's nickname. In spite of this, a skilled translator might be able to work around this problem by taking advantage of the fact that the name of the chess piece in those languages is the same as the word for horse, while the term for the armored warrior is etymologically related to the animal's name, since it evolved from the word for horseman. German, Polish, Russian, and Arabic translators, however, are pretty much screwed. The first 2 especially so, since the terms for the chess piece in those languages don't reference the animal it resembles, but rather its movement on the chessboard, being the equivalent of the English word jumper. So, in those last 4 cases, the full scope and nuance of the threefold knight reference really is untranslatable. But enough with the doom and gloom. Now that we've discussed the worst case scenarios across multiple languages, we're going to narrow our scope to German, and focus on instances which present reasonable challenges rather than insurmountable obstacles. One good example of this can be found among the generic enemy types in the game, specifically a member of the Freaks gang known as a Juicer. While the name is obviously derived from the word juice, which has several possible meanings in English, based on the entry in the Bat Computer's database, most notably the part about using a combination of cheerleading and, shall we say, pharmaceutical means to motivate their allies in battle, the relevant ones are those pertaining to psyching someone up and performance enhancement. Since this has nothing to do with fruit beverages or the associated kitchen utensil, a German word with the exact same double meaning as juice, but not the same literal meaning, was required. And one was found. Juicer was translated as Aufputscher, a noun derived from the verb aufputschen, which can be interpreted as providing a boost via verbal encouragement or incitement, or through the use of stimulants or doping, depending on the context. In fact, the derivatives Aufputschmittel and Aufputschpillen are the German terms for uppers and pep pills respectively, so this translation fits the requirements to a T, no pun intended. This kind of approximation, where you use free translation to communicate the gist of the source material rather than going for an exact word-for-word rendition of it, occurs rather frequently in localization. While I personally try and avoid it whenever possible, sometimes it's a necessary or unavoidable evil for various reasons. We've already gone over one of these cases, the untranslatable, but now we're going to take a closer look at other ones involving puns, wordplay, and idioms. In modern games, we tend to run into instances of this quite frequently when it comes to trophy and achievement names. So let's take a closer look at 5 of the ones from Gotham Knights, 2 involving Harley Quinn and 3 related to Clayface, to see how the problem was tackled. First up, we have a sophisticated mallet, a play on the phrase a sophisticated palette, where palette has been replaced with the name of Harley Quinn's favorite weapon, and an old cartoon staple, the trusty wooden mallet. The German equivalent, Ich zeig dir, wo der Holzhammer hängt, which literally translates as I'll show you where the wooden hammer hangs, also contains the word mallet as a replacement. But in this case, the basis is the German idiom jemandem zeigen, wo der Hammer hängt, to show someone where the hammer hangs, whose English equivalent would be something along the lines of to put someone in their place, or to show someone what's what or who's boss. Next is universal health scare, an obvious pun on universal health care. The German version, Gesundheitsunwesen, roughly means health nuisance, and I say roughly because it's a made-up nonsense word, or to be more precise, a portmanteau created by fusing the German term for healthcare system, Gesundheitswesen, with Unwesen, a word with a rather broad meaning that usually refers to a disruptive circumstance, nuisance, or act of mischief of some sort. Not quite the same as the English equivalent, but reasonably close, and perfectly in keeping with Harley's chaotic nature. Now we come to the Clayface trophies and achievements, where the English tendency to make jokes involving clay or mud was often mirrored to maintain the original spirit. The show Mud Go On is a pretty groan-worthy play on the show must go on, but the translator did their best to match the grimace factor. Das Schweigen der Lähme is German for the silence of the clays, and I'm pretty sure many of you can already guess from that reverse translation where this is headed. It's a riff on the German title of Thomas Harris's classic novel and its movie adaptation, The Silence of the Lambs, with the word for lambs having been swapped for the plural of clay. The last 2 trophy and achievement names will be discussed together, because they both take advantage of homonyms to produce double readings of established idioms. I'm admittedly uncertain about what deeper significance, if any, something in the clay has. I'd probably have called this one the remains of the clay if I'd been on English achievement naming duty, but that showbiz clavy is a pretty predictable groaner of a word substitution using the phrase that's showbiz baby as its starting point. The German equivalents, however, are far more interesting. Aside from being a synonym for clay, the word Ton can also mean note or tone, both in the musical sense as well as when it comes to vocal pitch, i.e. someone's tone of voice. The verb treffen, used here in its past tense getroffen, likewise has several possible meanings, though the ones of interest to us are to hit and to meet. While den falschen Ton getroffen is the German equivalent of the English idiom hit the wrong note, and this is how it would normally be interpreted, because of the multiple meanings assigned to the words Ton and treffen, it could also be read as met the wrong clay. And this is incredibly appropriate for an achievement that's unlocked after unexpectedly encountering a resurrected Clayface for the first time. Something similar occurs with nicht mit diesem Ton Basil, which can be understood as either don't speak to me in that tone of voice, Basil, or not with that clay, Basil. Another time when you might want to take liberties with a translation would be when doing so would help preserve some other aspect of the source material that would otherwise be lost in a straight conversion from one language to another. The first instance of this from the game we'll be looking at that illustrates this point involves the VIP lockdown procedure poster seen in the Kane Industries security office, specifically involving the acronym SAFER. If you reverse translate the German version of that part back into English, which is displayed on the far right, you'll notice that, strictly speaking, the text highlighted in yellow does not appear in the source material, and is technically an incorrect, or at least inaccurate, translation. However, these changes were purposely made in order to preserve the rather prominent SAFER acrostic in the target language, with the relatively minor inconsistencies being considered an acceptable trade-off. The second example is much more complex since it involves poetry, specifically a rather disturbing poem found in Professor Pig's old cell in the abandoned Arkham Asylum. In the English version, each line of the poem rhymes, ending in an oo sound: do, through, sinew, subdue, and you. Shame on you, Professor, for using through twice. Though given your reputation as a poet, I probably shouldn't be surprised. Now, as in the previous case with the safety poster, the text marked in yellow in the reverse translation on the far right has several major deviations from the English original. But the payoff is that all the lines in German also rhyme with one another, specifically with words ending in eiden: eingeweiden, vermeiden, schneiden, entscheiden, bescheiden, and leiden, which translate into English as viscera, avoid, cut, decide, be modest, and suffer, respectively. Poetry is just about one of the most difficult things that you can translate, so a lot of time and effort was invested into something that most players might not even bother reading. Though I guess having the opportunity to incorporate viscera into a poem completely unironically is kind of a reward in itself for a translator. Finally, in the last segment of this video, we're going to discuss what localization purists might consider a heretical idea, namely the possibility that certain translations might actually be an improvement over the source text in some way. Now, to be 100% clear, I'm most definitely not talking about cases where some activist translator turns characters into instruments for pushing their political or ideological propaganda. I'm referring to instances where freely translating a line of dialogue within reasonable limits or adding a new spin that wasn't in the original somehow makes something more memorable. One example of this in Gotham Knights that comes to mind for me occurs during a conversation between Alfred Pennyworth and Jacob Kane, Bruce Wayne's maternal uncle, concerning something he said following the deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne.
You said, life matters when death matters.
Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with the line, life matters when death matters, but for me, it just seems to lack the depth or insight necessary to elevate it to being a particularly memorable quote. Whether due to lip sync and timing issues or personal choice, I have no idea. But the German translator decided to take some liberties when translating this dialogue and came up with the following instead.
Sie sagten, der Tod zeigt den Wert eines Lebens.
Der Tod zeigt den Wert eines Lebens is German for death shows the value of a life. While certainly expressing the same general sentiment as the English original, this statement strikes me as more memorable and poignant, perhaps due to the emphasis on the bittersweet paradox that the inherent worth of someone's existence on this mortal coil will only become evident once they shuffle off of it. Whether this constitutes an improvement or not is, of course, highly subjective, and just my opinion, but I'm pretty sure that most people will agree that this next example, and the last discussion topic for today, is most definitely a step up. For those who haven't played Gotham Knights, a quick explanation. When you first encounter Harley Quinn in her cell at Blackgate Penitentiary, she refers to your character by a nickname which she will continue to apply to them in discussions and encounters with her throughout the rest of the game. For example, she christens Nightwing Nightbutt and Batgirl Bratgirl. When it comes to Red Hood, however, she decides to go full bore with the black humor by referencing Jason Todd's death at the hands of the Joker.
Deadhood. Looks like you've been eating well. Still big as an ox and twice as mean.
Been a while, Harley. You good?
Given the prevalence of English words in German pop culture, the game's translators decided to keep Deadhood, but just to add a bit of variety, regularly alternate between it and a translation of the nickname. Sort of.
Du lässt mich warten, Totkäppchen. Betz würde das nicht gefallen.
Ich weiß nicht. Das würde er schon verstehen.
The localized nickname Totkäppchen actually elevates the joke to an entirely new level. So, for all you non-Germans out there, here's a quick breakdown of what the translated version means and why it's actually pretty inspired. The German words for red and dead are rot and tot, respectively. Kappe means cap or hood, with Käppchen being a diminutive form meaning small, tiny, or little cap or hood, though it's most commonly used when referring to a skull cap or a beanie. On top of that, another German word for cap or hood is Kapuze, which would mean that straight translations of red hood and dead hood into German would be rote Kappe or rote Kapuze, and tote Kappe or tote Kapuze, respectively. So why doesn't Harley Quinn just call him one of those? Well, Rotkäppchen just happens to be the German name for Little Red Riding Hood, both the fairy tale as well as the eponymous protagonist. And this means that, in perfect keeping with her mischievous personality, Harley Quinn spends much of the German version of the game referring to Jason Todd as Little Dead Riding Hood. Like I said earlier, definitely in a different league compared to the English original. And on that humorous high note, we've reached the end of episode 1 of Translation Theory. For everyone who managed to make it this far, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed what you just saw and would like to see more, like and subscribe to my channel, sneak a peek at my old WordPress blog, The Raging Fanboy, visit the dumpster fire that is my Twitter feed if you dare, and help spread the word. Take care, and until next time, everyone.